180 and when rapid speed down to 2500.
Point wherever you reduce speed to 180.
BlackBox.
All right, so we're going to get started today. I have a special guest here with me who is part of my fraternity, the United States Marine Corps, Semper Fi. So my special guest is a author of 2 books right now, soon to be 3.
Soon to be 3.
And he's from the same timeline that I was in the Marine Corps, so he's got a little gray hair, more hair than I do to prove it. But T.S. Ransdell was your pen name, a.k.a. I like to call him Randy by mistake. So when we first met, Mr. Travis Ransdell here, let's welcome him to the show. Yeah, there we go. The fans love you.
Yeah.
So Semper Fi to you.
Oh, thank you.
Randy,
Semper Fi.
Randy Travis. I don't know, we met over Instagram. The Marine Corps had published a day where they were celebrating diversity, and I kind of gave them a what for my son, who has a number of tattoos on his left arm that, supports family members of our family in a lifetime, even all the way back to his grandmother that's up here on his chest. And so the Marine Corps didn't like where his tattoos were, Travis, so they told him he couldn't be a jarhead. And that was that post I wrote that you responded to, which that degree of separation has you now sitting in a seat in my studio in Virginia
Just think
Beach.
of that. Yeah, I remember going through it that day and being kind of angry about the post to begin with. And I remember you saying that because I thought, well, first of all, how many Marines didn't have tattoos on their forearms?
Yeah,
I mean, I was an oddity. I didn't get any on my forearms, but that was kind of
you were
rare.
odd man out.
I was.
Yeah. And I even went a step further. When I was in, I didn't want to do the devil dog and have this old bulldog on my arm that looked like a droopy Shar-Pei by the time I'm 50, which here I am.
Yeah.
So I got a Superman tattoo over here on my left arm before Shaq.
Okay.
Shaquille O'Neal made the Superman tattoo pretty famous. But it was one of my favorite cartoon characters growing up, and the Justice League.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get the Superman tattoo, and I'd tell my kids, "Hey, did you know hair grew on steel? Look right here." So I got a Superman tattoo, and then a little 275, which is a special number for our family.
Okay.
A little family tattoo. That's all I have. I got a couple. My wife has more tattoos than I do, so throw her under the bus today.
Yeah.
She'll appreciate that.
But
yeah, you made it all the way through the Marine Corps with no tats, huh?
Well, no, I did. I did get tattoos, just not on my forearms.
Yeah.
But I'd gotten, was it in the Philippines? I'd gotten a...
tattoo in the Philippines. Some of the Marines listening to this are going to go, okay, all right.
It was, we were pulling in. In fact, it was on the way to, so we'd sailed out of a boat from Okinawa, and we're going to Saudi Arabia. So this is at the very, very early stages of the whole Desert Shield. And we stopped off in the Philippines, and so I'd gotten a dragon tattoo.
Dragon?
Yeah.
Why a dragon?
I thought it was cool. I always thought dragons were kind of cool looking animals. And I got a red dragon because I was also kind of into, I liked reading a lot. And I read Arthurian legends about King Arthur using the red dragon as his symbol. And
nice.
So I thought it was cool. So I got it. It's not red anymore. The red's faded from it. And, like 7, you're 50 and you got a tattoo. It doesn't look as good as it did at the time. And another one is I got the Gadsden tattoo on my chest. Words liberty or death with the cold rattlesnake. Don't tread on me. So I ended up with one of those.
That's awesome.
So.
Well, if I didn't feel real bad about myself and my fitness right now, I'd say, hey, take your shirt off, show us your tats, but we'll save that for another day.
No, I understand.
We're not that kind of podcast around here. So.
Like I said, they don't look as good as they used to.
Right. So, while we're on the Marine subject, I always like to take a couple of minutes, even though I'm a little pissed off with the Marine Corps right now and their diversity policy that's not really diverse.
Yeah.
I'm okay with if a dude wants to like another dude, and I may have a spiritual difference about that in my religious beliefs, but I'm not going to hate on them for that. I'm going to love everybody and try to love everyone equally. The same as with the kid that's got a tattoo on his arm that's representing his family and diversity and his culture. I'm like, Marine Corps, I'm asking you, what's the big deal with tats? Reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. Commandant. Who's the new commandant? I don't even know who the commandant is. I'd love to talk to you. Sergeant Major, love to talk to you even more. No disrespect to the commandant, but educate me.
If in theory, if somebody's sexual practices are not going to have an impact on their mission, how's somebody's tattoo going to have an impact on their mission?
Yeah. And Marines don't get captured anyway, so let's just it's not like it's going to be a giveaway. Right?
No.
So, well, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about your book, and man, we're probably going to raise some eyebrows, and hair's going to stand up on people's arms when we start talking about the last Marine.
Well, I hope so.
We'll get to that in a few minutes, but would you with me? And I know your doc has told you no alcohol right now. You're in a testing phase, so but we can at least throw the glass up and salute our nation's military. And a little blue label, shout out to Johnny Walker. Marines love a little bit of spirit, right?
A little bit, just a little.
Cheers to our nation's military. Thank you for what you do and the sacrifice of you and your families who every day put it on the line. We just lost 8 Marines out your way. You were at Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, I saw that with the Amtrak that sank.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to those family members that lost their loved ones. The Marines on that vehicle. We call them Amtraks. I'm not sure what they're using now, but Kathleen, my wife, was reading an article, and the age of those young men were 18 to 23 years old. 23 was the oldest. And what most people don't know, for 20 years we've been sending our young people to war to protect our way of life. And in the Marine Corps, the average age of an infantryman, I don't know if you realize this, but you can probably relate to the time we were in, the average age of a Marine infantry warrior, 19 years old. And I don't know if that's changed in the Marine Corps today, if that's still the average, but when I was coming up, I looked around me, and man, the squad bay, I was an old man at 21 when I had just turned 21. And so I was like grandpa in the squad bay of 1st Battalion, Delta Company, Platoon 1056.
No, I can remember seeing like 20, 23, 25-year-olds and thinking they were old men.
Yeah, what are you doing here? But salute to those guys. Cheers. Thanks for coming out all the way from Arizona.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we appreciate having you here. When you get the doctor's orders and you're okay, you get the green light, I'll send you a bottle of Blue Label for coming out.
I'll have to give it a shot then.
Good stuff. Sitting here on the table. So one day, Blue Label, Johnny Walker, they'll like us so much that they'll sponsor us, and we'll give a bottle of Blue Label to all our guests. So that's what we're going to. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And then we'll give everybody a bag of Miller House coffee, which behind the scenes over here on the other side is my son-in-law, who directs and runs this thing and makes it sound good and look good. He and my daughter make coffee, or roast coffee would be the proper term.
Okay, yeah.
So, we had a little coffee this morning at a local coffee shop, but if you like where we were this morning, and I'll give them a shout out, 3 Ships Coffee, really good local coffee barista here in town. But if you like their stuff, you'll love Miller House. So shout out to Miller House Coffee here. Ian, you have to send me a check at the end of the episode, so I'll be looking for that. What's that?
So we got an hour now.
Okay, all right. So anyways, man, I've been looking forward to this conversation for about 4 weeks now. We truly did meet on Instagram, and so I just want to support my Marine brother and the book you've written, or 2 books you've written, and the one on the way, called The Last Marine. And pretty interesting story. And I love the book so much that I left it at my house this morning. So I'm such a dipshit for doing that. I apologize. I have them here on camera for you, but we're going to put it on our site. We'll have the books up there. If you go to blackbox.com or blackboxgrp.com, you'll be able to see the book there on the sites, and you can go to Amazon to pick up your books there.
Correct.
But let's get into that and have a conversation about a little bit on your background. Now, you used to be, in your first life there, a history teacher in Phoenix.
Yeah.
So give me a little insight on that.
Well, I got into teaching. Was never a career goal by any means. In fact, honestly, as a kid, I didn't like school.
Yeah.
But when I did go to college, everybody kept saying, study what you like. And I know when I took classes I didn't like, I didn't do well in them. So I drifted towards taking literature courses and history courses. And so I ended up with a degree in bachelor's in literature and then a master's in history.
Wait a minute. A Marine has 2 degrees?
I actually got 3, believe it or not. I know.
Making me look bad over here.
And
are you sure you really were a Marine?
I was. But so
what was your 3rd degree in?
that was in education.
Okay.
I later on would go, before I got into teaching, I went back to school and got a master's degree in education in order to get credentialed to teach.
I got you.
Because I actually had a time period before that where, I got out of college, and I think my first full-time job, I ended up working as a bouncer at a nightclub for a while.
Really?
And
I think we all went through that phase.
Yeah, and then I got a job working on boats, and technically I was an assistant engineer, but I spent a lot of time just scrubbing seagull crap off the deck.
Which you got that certification in the Marine Corps too.
I got that. So I already
Professional janitor.
had plenty of experience there.
Right.
And I then moving to Arizona, I worked as a tour guide for the Frank Lloyd Wright Association for a while.
Amazing architect.
There. Yeah. And took that job about as far as it could go, and then decided to go into teaching. And so to do that was when I'd gone back through the University of Phoenix, get a master's degree in education, which is how I met my wife, by the way.
Wow.
And so then that led to 11 years teaching in the Scottsdale Unified School District.
Wow. So you were a teacher, I think. So your wife's an educator. Mm-hmm. And you have 3 boys.
3 sons.
3 sons. Mm-hmm. And you were telling me over coffee this morning that you guys are now homeschooling your boys. And I can relate to that with 5 kids. We had a season of doing that. So you're a full-time author, father of 3 boys. Your wife's at home. How do you get any writing done?
Some days it's hard, but I got a spare bedroom. I'll shut myself in. I've got some noise canceling headphones I'll put on, and I just kind of lock myself in there. And I do come out occasionally, but it seems like more often than not, if I try to go out, if even like a quick drink of water or get a soda or something, a 5-minute break will turn into like a 15 or even 30-minute break.
Yeah.
So I try to limit that. But it's basically I just kind of have to seclude myself. And, my sons know when I'm in there. They don't knock on the door. They don't come in. Unless there's an emergency, of course.
Yeah.
But, I just kind of have to seclude myself. And I do, because I can get distracted easily. So I've got like the phone's on mute. There's no social media. Everything's shut down. I'll even set my computer up the night before. So all I have to do is flip it open, and I've got right there what I'm going to work on. So I don't even want the distraction of like checking out the news first or anything like that.
Because you can go down a rabbit hole
exactly.
Quickly, right?
And I've done that.
Relate.
I've done that before. I like to warm up with reading. Now, I used to try to warm up by maybe reading some news or something like that. And next thing I know, I'd wasted an hour piddling around on something, or an hour and a half. And so now I'll have the book ready that I'm going to read. I read it there, it's ready, do that for a half hour, and then I go right into writing.
So when we were talking this morning, I told you, man, folks, guys like you, or just people in general who have written just like your first book, few hundred pages, or the first book. How many pages were the first book?
It was about, I want to say it was about 95,000 words. And
Yeah.
I think in the print form, it's 300 plus. I think
And book
around
two?
Book two was longer. I think by the time it was edited,
Yeah,
it came out like around 120,000 words.
Right.
And I think it's in the print form, it's like around 500 plus pages.
So I wrote a little book we were talking about this morning that has a financial background, the mindset mentality, more of a self-help book called The Billionaire Within. Selfish plug for myself there. Get it on Amazon. But I wrote mine with a different purpose. Mine was really to help people understand what I do professionally in my financial services firm. So it was really more designed as a calling card. Hey, here's our concepts, here's our strategies. We should probably have a conversation if you like what I've wrote. For you, this is what you do full time. This is your occupation. But what's amazing, what I love most about finding out from entrepreneurs is what's your passion, what's your burning desire, what makes you tick. And putting pen to paper for you is your passion. You were sharing with me, I think, when we first talked, back to that Instagram post and got an introduction to each other. That's really your drive. It's not about money for you. It's about that cathartic feeling you get by getting into the characters of your book. And if you can, just for those out there who are entrepreneurs and maybe trying to understand how to get started writing a book, this goes back a number of years for you in terms of how you got your start at writing Last Marine, the first book in your series. But when you finally, you and your wife, you were telling me you got serious about it, what was the turning moment where you said, okay, I'm going to take a shot at this, I'm going to do it? And what was day one like?
What was day one? Well, the turning point was that things in my life had come to a point where, I wasn't happy teaching anymore. And they're personal events. As I was telling you earlier, I had the death of my father. My mother had some health issues. Felt a lot of stress, mental, emotional stress. Yeah. And I remember telling my wife, I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of feeling like I was in this rat race and not ever having enough time for anything. Feeling, that kind of overworked, underpaid kind of feeling. Yeah. And just thinking, this just isn't worth it anymore. I wasn't happy. I remember we'd taken the kids to the park, and they were playing. We were sitting on a bench drinking coffee and talking. I told her I really felt I was at a point where I wanted to sell everything we had and go move into a trailer somewhere, go live in the mountains. Yeah. And even if we didn't have much, at least just not be stressed out.
Right. Right.
And that was when she had suggested that I give writing really a full-time try. Wow. And it was something that
what a massive support when you can have a family member go, hey, I know you're not making any money at this, but you need to do this. Yeah,
she's been very supportive.
That's awesome.
Very, very.
What's her name?
Her name is Shannon.
Shannon. Good for you. Way to support him. That's awesome.
She's been a great wife throughout all this. Yeah. Because otherwise I'd probably be in a trailer somewhere in the mountains, But no, and she knew I'd been wanting. She knew I'd always, ever since I'd met her. She knew that was kind of my ultimate goal. Was to be an author. I wanted to be a writer, a storyteller. And I tried it multiple times, a couple times while I was teaching, and it just hadn't worked out. And even before that, I would try it. And I just always seemed busy. And for years, it was just always something that I would do. Like, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I thought, I'll have to write. When I get out of college, then I'll focus on writing. Yeah. Well, then it was getting a job. Well, and then it's just trying to and then I started having to get married, and then I have children, and life becomes less about trying to pursue that interest I had and more about just trying to survive more on a week-by-week basis. And being a writer was something that goes back to, I want to say when I was around 5 or 6 even. I can remember watching it was a Western on TV. Yeah. And it was a gunfight that was just so dramatic. These guys standing there in the music, and the idea of two men facing each other, this conflict where, one man's going to die and the other, only one will live, it struck a chord with me. And I remember getting on my parents' typewriter. It was back in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I got on the typewriter and started trying to type out my own story. And I think I only got about a page into it. But
was it the old return to on that typewriter where you hit the thing and move the roller back over to the left?
It was. I can picture it in my mind. You'd hit the thing. It was electric. But so this thing, this button you'd hit, and then it would slap over and make the ding noise. Yeah. And I don't know how my brother and I didn't break it because we'd often just hit it just to hear the ding noise. Yeah. But that was.
You felt so accomplished when you okay, line one accomplished. Ding.
But that was my first attempt at writing, and I always enjoyed it for writing assignments as a kid in school. But like I said, I never really made it a priority. It was just always something that I thought I would have time to do later. And then, let me get through. My thought was, let me get through this stage in life, and then I'll get serious about it.
Yeah.
And I actually haven't gotten to a point where I thought, I'm just not going to. I probably won't get done until after I retired from teaching or something like that. Because with teaching, you just, as we were discussing earlier, I'd just be exhausted at the end of the day. My mind would just be worn out because you're on so much managing that many kids during the day.
And at what grade? Were you teaching again?
High school.
Oh, geez.
And most of my courses were world history courses. So I primarily had the freshman and the sophomore.
Yeah.
So about 14, 15, some 16-year-olds.
So some kids wanted to be there, wanted to learn, and then
some
another
kids
group.
Do, yeah. Some don't, and you're fighting, and you're kind of the bad guy when you're the teacher, and everybody. I've joked about being like a prison guard. They're always waiting for you to make one, any little sign of weakness or inconsistency that they can exploit. They're on you. And it's not always done like in a malicious way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of kids being kids. And that's just kind of the atmosphere. That's just kind of the culture. You don't go in there expecting to be liked or to be the cool guy. And that's really not your purpose. That's not your mission. I always looked at like my job is to teach them history the best I can. And so that's what I would try to do. But
I'd have probably been a nightmare for you. I actually enjoyed history growing up, and that was the classes that I really did pay attention in. But I was that classic 16, 17-year-old where the frontal lobe had not fully developed, and I was checking out girls and daydreaming, and not in the point of really wanting to learn, but I was in history class. It was always intriguing to me, especially the Roman Empire. Was really interesting to me, which I want to get to that part in a few minutes, and really let's spend some time around the book and the storyline and the characters. But if we can spend a few minutes talking about your style, and especially for young writers out there who are trying to get started. And the person, like me years ago, someone could have said to me, Kenny, look, really just get your yellow pad out and start writing some thoughts down and get your big idea on paper. So for Last Marine, in order to come up with that storyline, in order to come up with those characters for Last Marine, how did you get there? Tell us about these characters.
Yeah.
Tell us about your writing style.
All right, that's a great question because it's for the first book. I can realize now I've been working on 2 other books since then. That first book, especially, I had spent about 20, 25 years writing it mentally without really realizing I was working on it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And expand on that.
I was going to say, daydreaming, basically, is what we would call it.
Yeah.
It'd think in my mind, like those jobs. I can remember, I was telling you I had a job where working on a boat. I can remember days of cleaning the boat or painting the boat. My body would be doing one thing, but my mind had that story playing in my head.
Yeah.
And that was the thing about teaching that I think made writing so difficult, where I had to be so focused on what I was doing with that. The story wasn't playing in my head.
Yeah. Do you journal?
No, I never have.
Interesting.
So I just would always have that in school. I always daydreamed in school. I always had stories playing through my head. I get bored, I'd have stories playing through my head. And
but you could recall these stories that you've turned that now into characters within a book. You've put those ideas on paper.
Yeah.
Collectively, a couple 100,000 words in a final draft, which I got to imagine was probably much larger than that.
It was, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you try to edit a lot of it out, because a lot of it you don't need. So like I said, with the first book, in some ways, I found it easier than these next two books.
Okay.
Because a lot of that was just kind of already there, and I just didn't even appreciate how it was there.
Yeah.
Then with the second book, I knew how I wanted it to end, because actually the first book was meant to be a backstory to the second book, but grew into its own story. So I knew with the second book where I wanted it to end, but it was, well, how do I get that going? And that was harder for me, because then
Did you pin that stuff down? Like you go, okay, here's the ending. This is like reverse engineer it. Did you start with the end in mind and
I did not
build the story?
Not at first, because the first book had flowed for me so well that then I just took that same approach into the second book. Didn't outline it or plan it out or anything
No
like
outline.
that. No outline. And because I didn't need to with the first one. But that was misleading, because I got with book 2, I got about 90,000 words into it that I'd written, and I was not happy with it. I realized the book was not going where I wanted. Just kind of sitting down and just seeing where the story took me that day.
Yeah.
It was not going where I wanted it to go, and I realized that the trajectories I had set, because book 2 has got a lot of parallel stories of all these people leading up to one major event, and I realized about 90,000 words into 88 to be somewhere a little over 88,000 words into it. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't where I had wanted it to go. And so I had to make the decision, am I going to write a different book or stick with that same kind of story that I wanted? And I decided to stick with what I wanted. So I started over. And then I stepped back and really kind of thought to myself, what is it I'm wanting to accomplish with this story? And that's where I started plotting it out and planning it out, and spent a lot more time than thinking. I think a lot about what I write. A lot of my writing isn't actually like sitting down at the typewriter or computer these days writing, but just even sitting and thinking. And I've actually kind of over time have grown to appreciate how important that is, at least to my process, to think about what I want. And I've got like a stack of legal pads like you've got there, where I would write out an outline, timelines, and sit and think and write so much, and then step back and then think, because things change while you write.
Sure.
And how I could work that in, or is that going to work? Because then, kind of like in a chess game, I wanted to think about what would be the logical step after those events to get to that kind of event that I wanted. Because I wanted that kind of, with no spoilers, I wanted that kind of climax. I wanted that kind of twist at the end that the reader would say, "Oh yeah." And
so let me take you back for, our podcast. We're going to have a number of entrepreneurs and people who are, looking for the ideas from other business people to see kind of how they did it. And I've been through some informal training with book writers and professional book writers who, wanted that outline, wanted that structure, wanted a plot, wanted you to lay the course of the book out, kind of like the way we learn in high school English of how to write a term paper. But you didn't approach book 1 that way.
No.
You took 25 years of a story, it sounds like, and just started putting started taking this fantasy, for lack of a better term, and putting it on paper. Am I tracking right? Yeah,
basically. And keep in mind, I had made attempts to write this book before.
Okay.
In fact, I know on my Instagram post, my wife had cleared some junk out, found some old floppy disk that has The Last Marine written on it.
A floppy disk?
A floppy disk.
We got to explain what a floppy disk is for our 18-year-olds out there. So.
Yeah. It's, it was a little plastic disk you could put in, and it was about, 3.5-inch disk.
Yeah.
And it says The Last Marine on there.
No
and,
kidding.
And I
were you able to extract that?
Not yet, anyway. Because then I can remember what I was writing back then, and it was different than what the story ended up. But because again, that dates back to around 1998, 99, somewhere in there.
So Noah, when he says floppy disk, do you actually know what he's talking about?
Yes.
You do? Oh, okay.
I've never used one.
Okay, 5 1/4 or 3
And,
3.5. Ian, you did?
Well,
On an old DOS computer, probably, right? Just a word processor.
It would have been. It was a old Dell. It was a Dell computer.
Yeah.
It's for. Well, no, actually, not a Dell, or was it?
I got a Dell,
It was either a Dell or a Compact. I forget what I had.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd have the floppy disk in there.
Sorry, man. I'm like a squirrel. You can get me off on a story, and I'll chase it.
I understand. And I had actually the idea. I remember when I came up with the idea for The Last Marine in 1992. So I was still in the Marine Corps at that time.
Okay, let's add some context to that. You came up with the idea in 1992. Mm-hmm. You published book 1 in what year?
2016.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was
my friend.
Yeah, that was what, a 24-year process from conception to completion to publication.
Wow.
And actually, if you want to count, because actually book 2 was kind of part of that. That came out last October of 2019.
So there's a story in that I love to cheerlead, is that if you have an idea, if you have passion about something, don't give up on it.
Absolutely.
Don't quit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every special forces guy that I've ever met, every SEAL that I've ever met, every Marine that I've ever met who were worth their weight, who was a real Marine, not the guys that quit on us.
Yeah.
The Q word.
Yeah.
But the moral of that story I'm getting from you is you didn't give up hope. You didn't quit on the idea of one day you would write a book. And what did that feel like when you publish? You go, I'm sending this to my publisher. I'm sending this to the printer. That had to be a pretty amazing day for you personally.
It was. The first one was almost kind of surreal, almost like it just wasn't. It didn't quite seem real, and I had a lot of things still going on in my life then. It's really with the second book, right? The gravity of it hit me, that I had accomplished something that I really had wanted to do all my life. That I had this story, and just that there's just that really good feeling that you realize you had something that was a dream, and you've seen it. You put the work into it, and you make it right there. And I could look at these 2 books and realize that this was an idea I'd had decades ago, and that I persevered. I made that happen. So it was a very good feeling.
And when you wrote the first book, and even since the first book, and you're on your third, and you have many ideas for others, you've taken the stance right now to self-publish. Help me through that. Help our listeners and entrepreneurs who may be thinking about writing a book. Why'd you choose self-publishing?
Mainly because I wanted to make it happen. I didn't want it to be dependent upon somebody else's decision or somebody else's okay. And it's not a knock against traditional publishing. Mainly, to me, it just seemed easier. It seemed more direct. I had another friend who had self-published, and he advocated it. And so I thought, why not just do it and not worry then about trying to sell it to somebody else or to get somebody's okay or somebody's approval. I could just do it. Because to me, it's not that I didn't or don't want to make money at it. I do. But I wanted to get that done. And so I just wanted that independence to do that.
So maybe the idea that if you were shopping it to a publisher, waiting for somebody to pick up your story, and then them having some control or maybe timeline over when you would release it or how the story would be told. You wanted to have the continuity of that being yours, not...
Well, and just not face the rejection of it either. You send it off and they say, no, forget it. I just wasn't in the mood to even... I wasn't in the mood to put up with that, or if you could say, or maybe it's just a matter of pride. I wanted to get it done, and then see how it would be accepted. Now, again, too, I also had no idea going through it the first time of just I kind of had this notion. All right, you write a book, put it out there, and see what happens. I've since learned there's a lot more work that goes to it.
So this is giving me context now. I'm sitting here writing down 24 years, 25 years or so, this idea was in your head about book one, The Last Marine. Here's what's interesting to me. When I started reading your book, I really felt like that you were mirroring present day and the geopolitical world that we're in right now, and everything from this woke environment and a very left-leaning agenda that we've seen in our media and the world that we live in, that it felt like to me that you were taking a fictional story with real-life characters and just changing the name of the guilty and the innocent.
But
this is 25 years ago you had these ideas and these characters were being developed.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, around the time we were in the Marine Corps, I don't know if you saw this, but I remember something was released through the Marine Corps about how China had, I think it was like a 10-year plan or something like that on how they could conquer the United States. And it was kind of laughed at the time because they didn't even have rifles for all their soldiers
without firing a
back
shot.
then.
By the way. Yeah.
Well, it's that they would become a superior military power to us.
Yeah.
And I remember it was kind of fluffed off, and I thought, well, that's a huge red flag. You got somebody saying they're coming after you. I thought that's really dangerous to just ignore that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, what we see, over the decades after that, then we saw a lot of our leaders warming up to these people, a lot of businesses shutting down here, moving over there, outsourcing there. And only now are we kind of seeing some of the repercussions of that. So that was one of the reasons why, in this book, I have this fictional Sino-American War, where China has risen up to be a greater world power than the United States, very much with our help. And this goes back to, 30 years ago when they were saying that they're coming after us and we're not doing anything to stop it.
What's interesting about that is one of the world's best performing portfolio managers, a guy named Ray Dalio, who he has a hedge fund that's, if not the largest, one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And he's kind of writing I call it a manifesto that he's calling a book, where he's alluding to present world power being challenged by up-and-coming world power, a.k.a. China. And he did a really good job, and you as a history major will appreciate this. If you haven't read any of Ray's work, I'd encourage you to go read
I'll have to check it out. Yeah,
some of his stuff. But he's got a book now that he's been releasing in chapters through LinkedIn that goes into what you're talking about, and your story 25 years ago coming to fruition now in the book that you've written fictionally feels real life to me. And I got to give you kudos to that. That's the intuition, maybe we'll call it, that you had to write this and to look into the future with this fiction that has, in some eerie way, become true.
Studying history helps with that too, because I know it sounds cliche to say history repeats itself.
I say that to folks a lot in my business.
Well, and that's because the facts don't really repeat themselves. But what is it? Human character, no matter what facts change, human character remains the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you read Old Testament in the Bible, and you can read my boys and I have been reading through was the book of Ezekiel, and you can see they're talking about how the Jews have rejected their culture. They're so far gone from what their culture was that they've rejected. They don't even realize they're rejecting God.
Yeah,
they're disobeying their 10 Commandments. They've taken on polytheism. They've even gotten into human sacrifices with small children, babies being put into fires.
Oh God.
And
sounds a lot like today.
Well, it's just it. They're sacrificing their children. They're rejecting their culture, their values of their ancestors that got them to where they were at, and they don't even realize they're rejecting it. And when Ezekiel tells them this, they're throwing him in jail. human character. I mean, you can go through history. Look at the French Revolution. Maximilien Robespierre and his Committee of Public Safety. The thing, they slaughter people in the name of public safety, in the name of the good. You have the
COVID.
Yeah, exactly. We have to all comply to be safe. And if you don't, then it's not just you disagreeing; it's you committing treason.
Jeez.
Like what the Nazis did in the name of doing good for the people.
Yeah.
The Soviets, the Russian Soviets have slaughtered, 40 million plus of their
we were talking
own
about that
people.
this morning.
Yeah.
I think it was closer to 60 million between the war when you add it all up. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you get them one of the reign of terror in the 1930s and this great purge that Stalin went through trying to hold on to power. Keep in mind too, when the Germans were invading Russia, they were initially hailed as liberators.
Yeah.
And then they started killing Russians, and they decided they were better off sticking with the communists.
And you and I talked about that this morning, and I see that going through Last Marine and kind of the story that you're sharing, and I talked about this concept that redistribution of wealth is one of the things, and I pay attention to that being in the financial business. That's one of the common themes that I see happening in our society today is this F word, and it's not F-U-C-K, it's fair.
Yeah.
That feels a lot like fuck.
Because it seems to always...
Somebody's always feeling like they're getting screwed in the system. And the thought I want to get across to you is that I talked about this Irish philosopher that had made the comment, I think in the 14th or 15th century, that said, if you took the world's wealth and you redistributed the world's wealth, and at that time you got to think about the monarchy, and you got to think about the time when this philosopher's, what his world was. But effectively saying, if you disperse the world's wealth among everyone, took it from the king and gave it to everyone, that the idea was that within 6 months, 180 days, it would be back in the control of the elite. Yeah. Someone's going to rise to the top. Someone's going to figure out a way in order to manage population. And it goes back to, I think, this human desire to be led. That's why the Marine Corps has done so well over 200 plus years, is that you have to have strong leadership. Yeah. You have to have strong, and you need a strong moral compass to have strong leadership. Excuse me. But this is the thing that has really stood out to me, is that we're in this culture now where people are feeling like, we've seen this happen in Portland, we've seen it happen on the West Coast, and we are seeing this great divide between the haves and the have-nots. But it's not because the haves did it to the have-nots. It's because the have-nots chose to not let their story play out. And I want to bring this back to you. 25 years, you had this idea that you cultivated. And this idea of think about this like human capital. That you let an idea, a seed was planted over 25 years ago in this book, The Last Marine, for you. And you didn't just plant the seed and let it be planted on rocky soil. You planted the seed in fertile soil, and you allowed it to cultivate. And then all of a sudden, the rooting system that went down sprouted up. And this idea, this dream became reality because of your passion, your commitment, your stick-to-itiveness. And so I got to salute you for that.
Oh,
as a Marine. That just shows that's why you joined the Marine Corps. You didn't give up. Yeah. And I think that's what we have in society today, is we have a lot of people. I was going to use a P word, but I want to be careful that your boys may be listening to this podcast. But we've become a wimpy nation of people who start something and give up.
Right.
And reading through this Last Marine and the character you talked about with the young man and conversations with his grandfather, who really just had these core beliefs, even though he had kind of allowed society around him to get a little weird.
Yeah.
A lot like what we have today. He didn't give up on those core beliefs. And it really helped develop the grandson, the character in this book. So share with us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, it kind of plants that seed in that
Yeah.
character. And, well, I thought when I wrote the character, Abe Levine, I'm thinking back a lot.
Which is the character in this book
Which is the
we're talking
character,
about.
the grandfather. I'm pulling from a lot of what was old America. And I think back of, I'm fortunate where I look at the men in my life. My own father, a very intelligent, hardworking man, very strong man. I have two grandfathers that were the same. These are guys who got through the Depression, that got through. One of my grandfathers never went to high school.
Wow.
And then still had worked his way up to even being elected mayor in his city, and was an accomplished business owner. And another grandfather, also an accomplished entrepreneur. Guy started up several businesses that were successful. And I mean, these were hard men who lived through hard times. And their attitude was, you either win or you die. I mean, you just keep fighting.
Love that. Yeah.
It's not easy, not meant to be easy. I mean, there were times like one of my grandfathers. I mean, they supplemented their diet because he'd go out and shoot squirrels as a boy. He'd take his .22 rifle out and he'd shoot squirrels.
That's awesome.
And in fact, me and my dad talked about, he got in trouble. He used to hunt chickens. There was a chicken slaughterhouse where he grew up, and he loved to go down there and shoot them with his bow and arrow. And his dad got mad at him for doing that because that was something, he'd hunt squirrels to feed the family, and he wasn't going to have his son out hunting chickens to feed them, So,
awesome.
So I mean, I grew up with men like this, with this kind of an attitude, and you just slug it out. You just grind your way through these tough times, and you don't. It's not supposed to be easy.
So 24 years of grinding on a book. I mean, you had this grind in your head, and you had these ideas of probably. I don't want to try to psychoanalyze you here, but I would guess that over 23 years, you had a lot of moments of self-doubt. That am I really worthy of writing this book? And what if it fails?
Yeah.
What was the trigger? Was it your wife? Was it just being fed up with the school system as a teacher?
Yeah, well, kind of a little both.
What flipped the switch to go?
There.
I'm doing this. Damn it!
Just basically because I felt like I was dying a slow death working at the school in the school district.
Yeah.
Wasn't happy with it.
I'm sure a lot of teachers today can relate to that.
Yeah, I think a lot do, because a lot of teachers. I remember when I started and talking to another guy when we started at the same time. And we're like, why is everybody's been here so long? They all look sad and depressed. They're angry all the time. They're cynical all the time.
Yeah.
And after a decade plus in there, I can understand why.
Yeah.
And so it was.
Do you consider yourself a cynic? So somebody on the outside maybe reading The Last Marine may look at you and go, "Oh, you're one of those guys who just have this kind of negative Nancy outlook on life." Not that I've seen that in the book, but I could see where someone might accuse you of that.
I could see so too. I may have a little cynical. Sometimes I think I am a little too cynical. Then ironically, it seems that then facts or the person will back me up when I see it play out.
Right.
And somehow, we get kind of conditioned in our society. We're not supposed to think poorly or to assume the worst of people.
Yeah.
And I do understand some wisdom in that. On the other hand, I think it's just as dangerous to be naive. When you see something bad happening, it doesn't do any good to stick your head in the sand and say, no, it's not that bad. It'll be okay. Because sometimes it's not. If you ignore a problem, it's not always all right. Or you ignore asocial behavior or destructive behavior, it's probably not going to be all right unless you do something to stop it or to stop that person.
I listened to a professor. I actually listened to Joe Rogan's podcast a lot, JRE. And I was listening to, I think it was a professor that he had interviewed. This guy was a mathematician. Lindsay, I think is his last name. But he's kind of studied this whole woke movement and where it started at the university level, where we got to a point in our society, in a lot of universities and a lot of secondary education, where critical thinking was no longer being challenged, and where, especially in a lot of the liberal arts schools, where if an idea was put out or a way of thinking was put out, there was no one there challenging that idea or behavior, which is where this whole kind of woke agenda has risen to the top and has become a little bit of a shit show for us here in our country.
Well, I'd even argue it's critical and analytical thinking is not being taught anymore. I saw it as a teacher. A lot of other teachers do not teach students to think critically or analytically. They may not even realize that they're not doing that. But like a common assignment I saw with teachers using, say, in American history, was teaching about slavery in the United States. And, I've seen this actually the same technique applied with other lessons or other scenarios. But with this one, like, how would you feel if you were a slave? How would you feel if your family was sold to different owners and were separated? And how would you feel if you had the person, your owner, wouldn't feed you, would beat you, you'd have to, you had no new clothes. This kind of circumstances. Well, that's not critical and analytical thinking, nor, honestly, is that teaching about American slavery or the slave trade worldwide, which has existed everywhere. What it teaches is for people to have an emotional reaction. They're teaching emotionalism. Yeah. And so what they're teaching is just this very negative reaction, but not really knowing why. And most of the negative reaction or the emotional response is, boy, this is a bad country. Boy, the United States is bad. American culture is bad. Yeah. And I think we see that play out in our streets today. People are angry and don't even, if you ask most of these people, like in chat or anyone who claims to be a Marxist, what do you stand for? What is it about Marxism you like? More than likely, or what is it about their cause that they like? They're going to tell you that the United States is an evil country. They're going to tell you capitalism isn't fair. A lot of them do not strike me that they even know what it is they believe in or what it is they're advocating for. They just know what they're against, and they're against America. They're against freedom, and that's what capitalism is an expression of freedom. Sure. And they're against all that because they think it's bad, they think it's evil, and most people do not think, you cannot logically conclude that freedom is a bad thing unless you're an aspiring tyrant. Yeah.
I think that goes back to, and feel free to disagree, and if you're watching the podcast today, you don't have to agree with anything that we're chatting over. It's okay. You have your right to believe what you want, and as my daughter says, I'll believe the truth. You believe what you want, I'll believe the truth. Yeah. But I saw this happening years ago, where I was in a church league at a church I used to be a part of, and we had this basketball league called Upward Basketball, and I was an athlete, a competitor growing up, and I wanted to win. I wanted to win everything I put my heart into, and that I tried it. Nothing wrong with upper basketball. Love the league. But hear me out what I'm about to say here. It created a generation of children, even in the church community, that everyone got a trophy. And my daughter even pointed this out to me. I coached girls basketball at a Christian high school for a number of years, and she got this award one year. It was called the Gator Award. And she was like, Dad, I really just got that trophy because there was, I was on this team, and she wasn't the best basketball player on the team. She had heart. She would go for it, and that's why I gave her the award. It meant something to me, but to her it was like, well, everybody's got to get a trophy, so I get the first place loser trophy called the Gator Award. Yeah. Sorry, Gators. But that's kind of what it feels like with me in this woke generation now, is that it comes back to that F word, They feel like they're getting effed, and they think everything should be fair, and they get to define fair.
Yeah.
If I define fair as someone who's had success in this capitalistic society, then, I'm part of that group who's trying to hold this other group down, and that's not fair.
Well, I think the evidence of indoctrination in this country is that a lot of these people we see out there protesting about fairness come from upper middle class families. A lot of them are kids. They're young or young adults who, they've gone to college. They've had a lot of advantages that a few, 2-3 generations ago, most Americans didn't have.
Yeah.
And that says something there for our system that has allowed for a creation of wealth, an advancement of technology, an elevation of lifestyle, that these people aren't just trying to survive. They're not figuring out how can I work an extra 20 hours a week, sleeping 2-3 hours a night just to try to survive or feed the family. But they're, like I said, that they can go through college, they come from an upper middle class background, but yet the system isn't fair. Because supposedly people aren't doing well. And this isn't their personal experience that they're relating to.
Yeah.
They're relating to what they've been taught or what they've been told in school or in college. And they, in my opinion, have been, I don't even say they've been sold a bill of goods. They've just basically been indoctrinated to hate themselves. Because these are not natural. There's nothing fact-based in what they claim is wrong about American culture or about their freedoms. There's nothing logical in hating yourself or your own nation. That really has to be taught to reach that level of destruction and self-hate. That's not natural. That's not a natural reaction. And I'd put it equivalent to someone who's been raised in a dysfunctional family, abusive parents, where they are taught to hate themselves to the point. And in fact, I've got some characters that reflect this in the second book.
I was going to say, this kind of comes out of in your book and in your writing, which I thought was really intriguing for me, and it's even more so intriguing that this was in the making 24, 25 years, and we're seeing kind of these predictions, this, for lack of a better term, prophecy of what you were saying was going to happen has started happening.
Well, yeah, and the events of the last few weeks really was a kind of validation I look for. My second book, I have this big riot that takes place in San Diego. It's designed to look spontaneous. Like I said, it's designed, and I have several characters that trace the events, and not just what I love about stories is not just characters doing something, but why they do it. Yeah. And so I like to give a lot of background to characters to what motivates them to act the way they act. Because sometimes seemingly, like in book 1, I have a Marine and a Chinese soldier who on the surface, they can look like killers, but I try to get into what motivates them to kill. Why I try to treat killing really as kind of a neutral act, whereas you have a Marine who's killing to defend what he loves, while on the other you have someone who kind of enjoys that rush of power and control when he kills. And it's the same with the writing here, where you have people that on the surface look like they're wanting to destroy, but what is motivating them to do this?
This is so interesting to talk with you about it, and we're hitting all around book 1, and we're at 1 hour right now with 8 seconds left. Let's take a potty break. Okay. For the young kids at home, that means we got to go pee as old men, or our prostates are pushing on our bladder, or something like that. Something gross like that. But, so let's take a little break here, and can you hang around for another hour, and we'll do part 2?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a little break.